Hi, it's Miss Melissa with the Oosterhout Free Library and the next bit of Beverly Cleary's Ramona the Pest. It's published by Avon Books. There's a substitute in the kindergarten class. Ramona's not having that, so she hid. She got caught, and now Miss Mullen, the principal, is taking her, dun 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 dun, to face the substitute. Ramona felt a little indignant because Miss Mullen did not demand to know why she had been hiding all that time. Miss Mullen did not even notice how forlorn and tear-stained Ramona looked. Ramona had been so cold and lonely and miserable that she thought Miss Mullen should show some interest. She had half expected the principal to say, "Why, you poor little thing, why were you hiding behind the trash cans?" The looks on the faces of the morning kindergarten when Ramona walked into the room with the principal made up for Miss Mullen's lack of concern. Round eyes, open mouths, faces blank with surprise. Ramona was delighted to see the whole class staring at her from their seats. They were worried about her. They cared what happened to her. "Ramona, this is Mrs. Binney's substitute, Mrs. Wilcox," said Miss Mullen. To the substitute she said, "Ramona's a little late this morning." That was all. Not a word about how cold and miserable Ramona had been. Not a word about how brave she had been to hide until recess. "I'm glad you're here, Ramona," said Mrs. Wilcox as the principal left. "The class is drawing with crayons. What would you like to draw?" Here it was, seat work time, and Mrs. Wilcox was not even having the class do real work, but letting them draw pictures as if it was the first day of kindergarten. Ramona was most disapproving. Things were not supposed to be this way. She looked at Howie, scrubbing away with a blue crayon to make a sky across the top of his paper, and Davy, who was drawing a man whose arms seemed to cut him out of his ears. They were busy and happy, drawing whatever they pleased. "I would like to make use," Ramona said on sudden inspiration. "Make use of what?" asked Mrs. Wilcox, holding out a sheet of drawing paper. Ramona had been sure all along that the substitute could not be as smart as Miss Binney, but at least she was expected to know what the letter Q was. All grown-ups were supposed to know the letter Q. "Nothing," Ramona said, as she accepted the paper and, pleasantly self-conscious under the odd stares of the kindergarten, went to her seat. At last, Ramona was free to draw the letter Q her own way. Her own way is making it look like little cats. Forgetting the loneliness and discomfort of the morning, she drew a most satisfying row of Q's Ramona style and decided that having a substitute teacher was not so bad after all. Mrs. Wilcox wandered up and down the aisle looking at pictures. "Why, Ramona," she said, pausing by Ramona's desk, "what charming little cats you've drawn. Do you have kittens at home?" Ramona felt sorry for poor Mrs. Wilcox, a grown-up lady who did not know the letter Q. "No," she answered, "our cat is a boy cat." Chapter 5. Ramona's engagement ring. "No," Ramona said on the first rainy morning after she had started kindergarten. "Yes," said Mrs. Quimby. "No," said Ramona, "I won't." "Ramona, be sensible," said Mrs. Quimby. "I don't want to be sensible," said Ramona. "I hate being sensible." "Now, Ramona," said her mother, and Ramona knew she was about to be reasoned with, "you have a new raincoat. Boots cost money, and Howie's old boots are perfectly good. The soles are scarcely worn." "The tops aren't shiny," Ramona told her mother, "and they're brown boots. Brown boots are for boys." "They keep your feet dry," said Mrs. Quimby, "and that is what boots are for." Ramona realized she looked sulky, but she could not help herself. Only grown-ups would say boots were for keeping feet dry. Anyone in kindergarten knew that a girl should wear shiny red or white boots on the first rainy day, not to keep her feet dry, but to show off. That's what boots were for, showing off, wading, splashing, stamping. "Ramona," said Miss Quimby sternly, "get that look off your face this instant. Either you wear those boots or you stay home from school." Ramona recognized that her mother meant what she said, and so, because she loved kindergarten, she sat down on the floor and dragged on the hated brown boots, which did not go with her new flowered plastic raincoat and hat. Howie arrived in a yellow slicker that was long enough for him to grow into for at least 2 years, and a yellow raincoat that almost hid his face. Beneath the raincoat, Ramona glimpsed a pair of shiny brown boots, which she supposed she would have to wear someday when they were old and dull and dirty. "Those are my boots," said Howie, looking at Ramona's feet as they started off to school. "You better not tell anybody." Ramona plodded along on feet almost too heavy to lift. It was a perfect morning for anyone with new boots. Enough rain had fallen in the night to fill the gutters with muddy streams and to bring worms squirming out of the lawns onto the sidewalks. The intersection by the school was unusually quiet that morning because the rain had halted construction on the new market. Ramona was so downhearted she did not even tease Henry Huggins when he led her across the street. The kindergarten playground, as she had expected, was swarming with boys and girls in raincoats, most of them too big, and boots, most of them new. The girls wore various sorts of raincoats and red or white boots, all except Susan, who carried her new white boots so they would not get muddy. The boys looked alike because they all wore yellow raincoats and hats and brown boots. Ramona was not even sure which boy was Davy. Not that he mattered to her this morning. Her feet felt too heavy for chasing anyone. Part of the class had lined up properly by the door, waiting for Miss Binney, while the rest ran about, clomping, splashing, and stamping. "Those are boys' boots you're wearing," said Susan to Ramona. Ramona did not answer. Instead, she picked up a smooth pink worm that lay wiggling on the playground, and without really thinking about it, wound it around her finger. "Look!" yelled Davy beneath his big rain hat. "Ramona's wearing a worm as a ring!" Ramona had not thought of the worm as a ring until now, but she saw at once the idea was interesting. "See my ring!" she shouted, thrusting her fist towards the nearest face. Boots were temporarily forgotten. Everyone ran screaming for Ramona to avoid being shown her ring. "See my ring! See my ring!" shouted Ramona, racing around the playground on feet that were suddenly much lighter. When Miss Binney appeared around the corner, the class scrambled to line up by the door. "Miss Binney! Miss Binney!" Everyone wanted to be the first to tell. "Ramona's wearing a worm as a ring." "It's a pink worm," said Ramona, thrusting her hand out. "Not an old dead white worm." "Oh, what a pretty worm," said Miss Binney bravely. "It's so smooth and pink." Ramona elaborated. "It's my engagement ring." "Who are you engaged to?" asked Anne. "I haven't decided," answered Ramona. "Not me," Davy piped up. "Not me," said Howie. "Not me," said Eric R. "Well, Ramona," Miss Binney was searching for words, "I don't think you should wear your ring during kindergarten. Why don't you put it down on the playground in a puddle so that it will stay fresh?" Ramona was happy to do anything Miss Binney wanted her to do. She unwound the worm from her finger and placed it carefully in a puddle where it lay limp and still. After that, Ramona raced around the playground with the worm around her finger whenever her mother made her wear Howie's old boots to school. And whenever anyone asked who she was engaged to, she always answered, "I haven't decided." "Not me," Davy always said, followed by Howie, Eric R., and any other boy who happened to be near. Then one Saturday, Mrs. Quimby examined Ramona's scuffed shoes and discovered that not only were the heels worn down, The leather of the toes was worn through because Ramona stopped her lopsided two-wheel tricycle by dragging her toes on the concrete. Mrs. Quimby had Ramona stand up while she felt her feet through the leather. "It's time for new shoes," Mrs. Quimby decided. "Get your jacket and your boots and we'll drive down to the shopping center." "It isn't raining today," said Ramona. "Why do I have to take boots?" "To see if they'll fit over your new shoes," answered her mother. "Hurry along, Ramona." When they reached the shoe store, Ramona's favorite shoe salesman said, as Ramona and her mother sat down, "What's the matter with my little Petunia today? Don't you have a smile for me?" Ramona shook her head and looked sadly and longingly at a display of girls' boots on one side of the store. There she sat with Howie's dingy old brown boots beside her. How could she smile? A babyish nursery school girl who was wearing new red boots was rocking joyously on the shoe store's rocking horse while her mother paid for the boots. "Well, we'll see what we can do for you," said the salesman briskly as he pulled off Ramona's shoes and made her stand with her foot on the measuring stick. Finding the right pair of Oxfords for her did not take him long. "Now try on the boots," said Mrs. Quimby in her no-nonsense voice, and Ramona had walked across the shoe store and back in her new shoes. For a moment, as Ramona sat down on the floor and grasped one of the hated boots, she considered pretending she could not get it on. However, she knew she could not get away with this trick because the shoe store man understood both children and shoes. She pulled and yanked and tugged and managed to get her foot most of the way in. When she stood up, she was on tiptoe inside the boot. Her mother tugged some more, and her shoe went all the way into the boot. "There," said Mrs. Quimby. Ramona sighed. The babyish nursery school girl stopped rocking long enough to announce to the world, "I have new boots." "Tell me, Petunia," said the shoeman, "how many boys and girls in your kindergarten?" 29, Ramona said with a long face. 29, most of them with new boots. The happy-booted nursery school baby climbed off the rocking horse, collected her free balloon, and left with her mother. The shoeman spoke to Mrs. Quimby. "Kindergarten teachers like boots to fit loosely, so the children can manage by themselves. I doubt if Petunia's teacher has time to help with 58 boots." "I haven't thought of that," said Mrs. Quimby. "Perhaps we'd better look at boots after all." "I bet Petunia here would like red boots," said the shoeman. When Ramona beamed, he added, "I had a hunch that would get a smile out of you." When Ramona left the shoe store with her beautiful red boots, girls' boots, in a box, which she carried herself, she was so filled with joy she set her balloon free just to watch it sail over the parking lot and up into the sky until it was a tiny red dot against the gray clouds. The stiff soles of her new shoes made such a pleasant noise on the pavement that she began to prance. She was a pony. No, she was one of the 3 billy goats Gruff, the littlest one, trip-trapping over the bridge as the troll was hiding under. Ramona trip-trapped joyfully all the way to the parking lot, and when she reached the home, she trip-trapped up and down the hall and all around the house. "For goodness sake, Ramona," said Mrs. Quimby, while she was marking Ramona's name in the new boots, "can't you just walk?" "Not when I'm the littlest billy goat Guff," answered Ramona, and trip-trapped down the hall to her room. Unfortunately, there was no rain the next morning, so Ramona left her new boots at home and trip-trapped to school, where she did not have much chance of catching Davy because she could run faster than she could trip-trap in her stiff new shoes. She trip-trapped to her seat, and later, because she was art monitor who got to pass out drawing paper, she trip-trapped to the supply cupboard and trip-trapped up and down the aisles passing out paper. "Ramona, I would like it if you walked quietly," said Miss Binny. "I'm the littlest billy goat Gruff," explained Ramona. "I have to trip-trap." "You may trip-trap when we go outside." Miss Binny's voice was firm. "You may not trip-trap in the classroom." "At playtime, the whole class turned into Billy Goat's Gruff and trip-trapped around the playground, but none so joyfully or so noisily as Ramona. The gathering clouds, Ramona noticed, were dark and threatening. Sure enough, that evening rain began to fall, and all night long it beat against the south side of Ramona's house. The next morning, Ramona, in her boots and raincoat, was out long before Howie arrived to walk her to school. She waded through the wet lawn, and her boots became even shinier when they were wet. She stamped all the way through the little puddles on the driveway. She stood in the gutter and let muddy water run over the toes of her beautiful new boots. She gathered wet leaves to make a dam in the gutter so she could stand in deeper water. Howie, as she might have expected, was used to his boots and not a bit excited. He did enjoy stamping in puddles, however, and together they stamped and splashed on the way to school. Well, they're only halfway to school. Something might still go wrong. We'll find out next time on Book Bites from the Oosterhout Free Library. And check our newsletter and our YouTube page for lots of other virtual content, including Science Saturdays and Story Times, and lots of other chapter books.